Welcome to the Personal Pension Radio Podcast, where it's all about helping you complete your financial journey to retirement. Discover time-tested strategies and get unconventional insights into wealth building and retirement that actually work. Break away from the herd and go for the retirement you dream of. And now, here's your host, the income engineer, Kraig Strom.
All right, thank you for joining me once again on Personal Pension Radio. Yes, I am the income engineer. Yes, someone asked me again recently, are you really an engineer? And I said no. The U.S. Trademark and Patent Office included that in my actual registered trademark of the income engineer, that I cannot say that I am an actual engineer. So yes, I am the income engineer. I have a passion for retirement and post-exit, meaning if you sell a business or transition to something new, income planning, because that's the part of the retirement equation that Wall Street really doesn't pay a lot of attention to. And I gravitated in that direction, years ago, and really became a mission of mine to be as good and as well-rounded and in the income planning space as I was in the accumulation and investing and saving and so forth aspects of retirement planning, and really dug in to the income planning. That is where the income engineer was born. Well, the income engineer was born in that respect. I was born in Maine. And a shout out to cousin Bob back in Maine, who told me last week that he actually listens to my show. Really appreciate that. He's probably either sitting on the porch watching a beautiful sunrise or sunset on the lake in Maine, making me jealous, or worse yet, he's in a kayak on the lake catching bass and just having a phenomenal time in retirement. Love you, Bob. Thanks so much for listening. Now, I'm going to jump in. Today as a short stuff show. So quick disclosure, I am not an attorney. I am not a CPA. I am a certified financial planner. Please, as cool as my microphone makes me sound sometimes, please don't act on things that you hear on this show as if you're hearing advice for you specifically. And especially, please, dear goodness me, don't act on advice or things that you hear on financial entertainer shows like Dave Ramsey's show or any other podcast or television show for that matter. Please meet with a qualified, certified financial planner who can go through your specific situation before you then get recommendations that you have the opportunity to act on. Certified financial planners act on a very strict code of ethics. They have to follow the integrity, objectivity, the competence, the fairness and confidentiality, and the professionalism standards of a certified financial planner. Please do yourself a favor. If you don't have access to or haven't found a good certified financial planner right now, or great one if that is what you're looking for, I would love to volunteer. You can't see it, but my hand is raised. Send me an email, Kraig, Kraig, at kraigstrom.com. Send me an email, Kraig at kraigstrom.com, and we can connect, because the world nowadays is a very small place. Connected with a listener who is working often in Saudi Arabia, lives in Texas, and looking forward to continuing to stay connected with him. He's heading back to Saudi Arabia really soon, and love how small the world is nowadays. Now, I do have a deal of the week this week, even though we have a short stuff segment show. The deal of the week, couldn't resist. So for some of you who have listened to the show, and if you're new, I am a Porsche fan. I like cars in general. I actually have a car show, and I have a car dealership license. Now, car show, if you're interested, is Cars and Coffee Corona. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on Instagram. Soon to have a website, but Cars and Coffee Corona is my car show, and I'm a car nut. I personally like Porsches. I love, the cars themselves. I like the way they look, all of that good stuff. But you also have to know that I enjoy not paying full retail price for anything I can help if I can help it. So the same goes for Porsches. I might drive a car that looks really fancy and pretty and might look a little expensive. The reality is I never pay the price that people think that my cars might be worth. That's something that I just can't do. I can't pay for a new car. Oh, heaven forbid. But I love to find a good deal. High mileage, still looks pretty, or maybe with a little bit of elbow grease, as my mom or my dad might say. Little elbow grease, the car can look more beautiful than it was when I got it, and I save a ton of money. Now, in my Porsche Cayman, the headliner started to fall. So the headliner is that cloth fabric that is glued to the ceiling, the roof of the car. And it's pretty standard because my car has nearly 80,000 miles on it. And it's pretty standard. It started to sag and it was falling down on my head. And I researched repair options and I found that it was either a pricey and involved process of taking my car apart. Basically, I have to remove a bunch of panels and clips and retainers and got to yank the entire headliner out. And then you got to either have it done and I would probably have someone do it just because there's so many things that you could do to screw it up and then put it all back together. Or with some research, and I won't say quick research, with a number of different, quick blog posts and articles I read, and it didn't take me a long time, but I found that you could buy headliner retainers. These are little pigtail screw-in deals, things that upholstery repair shops would use. And you could buy headliner retainers. They're like little screws that screw into the existing headliner foam and hold the cloth nice and tight back in place. It does not look perfect to me as like factory, but you know what? It works. It works really well. And I showed it to somebody yesterday, a car guy, and he looked at it and went, man, that actually looks pretty cool. I like that. Interesting, the response that I got from a crazy car guy who said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I loved it because I spent $10 on retainers instead of at least $300 for a new install. It would have been at least $300 to have the car disassembled and have the headliner yanked out and a new one put back in. That's a 96% savings. Right? I love that. And I like the fact that I did it myself. And I've been having a bit of a bum knee lately. I don't know what I did, something with a running injury, or maybe my dear wife was kicking me in the night. But I wasn't really able to do a lot of moving around. So sitting in the car working on the headliner just kept my knee still. So I was actually able to rehabilitate my leg. That's my joke. Rehabilitate my leg while I was saving 96%. So that's my quick deal of the week. Now, the last episode, just FYI, in the last episode, I touched on a market watch, an investment market watch warning, and also covered this warning on paying off mortgages and versus stretching them out. 15 again versus 30-year mortgages. Please, please, please pay attention to that. Watch out for that because that just seems to be the big push lately. I hear more and more and more marketing around 15-year mortgages than I've heard in a while. And I think it's just the real estate market and the mortgage and interest rate environment is still crazy. So please check that out. And in the last episode, I also responded to a question from a listener regarding using a credit card for everything you could possibly use it for. Yes, yes, yes. Check that out if you're interested. But now, as promised, short stuff segment. This episode, I want to continue with my plea, my earnest plea to get your estate planning done. Get your estate planning done, your living trust, your wills, your powers of attorney, for healthcare and finance. Get it done, folks, please, right? Share this with your family and your friends, okay? There was some somber news in my family recently, and that was that my wife's father passed away, and he passed away recently, and of course we lost my mother-in-law a little over a year ago, and then we lost father-in-law, actually almost 2 years ago, but we lost mom, and we lost father-in-law, my wife's father, just recently, and it was just really tough. It was very, very difficult to know that was coming, and then ultimately knowing didn't make it any less, difficult, when it actually happened. But I want to share with you this idea that there's a major, major difference when someone passes away, especially a father or a mother, both of them pass away, either with a living trust and a full estate plan or intestate. Intestate meaning they got nothing. They may have a will, or they got nothing. They have no planning whatsoever. I got to tell you that living trust and an estate plan versus intestate, I was able to tell my wife that part is not going to be easy, and the part I'm referring to is settling the estate, right? And getting the estate all taken care of after dad is gone. That part's not going to be easy, but it's not, thanks to having the estate plan in place, it's not going to be hard. It's not going to be overly difficult. There's not going to be a lot of government involvement and red tape and hassle, right? So now my wife and her brothers are tasked with settling the estate for her parents. And as I said, thankfully they had a living trust, and it was properly funded. Hear me, folks, on this, properly funded. When you get a living trust handles the assets of a deceased person or persons. If you do not fund the living trust with the assets, there's nothing in the trust. So I see this mistake so often in the last 20 years. People buy a cheap living trust from a manufacturing attorney that just cranks out living trusts all day, and then they don't fund it. They don't transfer their house into their living trust, or they buy a living trust on LegalZoom, and then they don't end up putting their house in their living trust, and therefore the living trust is not funded, and the house is sitting out there ready to go to probate. Thankfully, my wife's parents had a living trust. They had a full-blown estate plan. It was all set and situated. It was properly funded. The house was in the trust. Everything is good that way. Now, they need to settle the estate. Now, a quick reminder. Remember, of what their life would be like if their parents did not have a trust. Intestate, right? That would be 18 to 24 months minimum in California of probate misery and thousands of dollars in lost statutory attorney fees. I remember talking to an attorney once, and I'd asked her about her practice, her legal practice, and she told me all these cool things that she used to do. And I said, "You said you used to do those things." She says, "Yeah, I only do probate now." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because the state of California has mandatory statutory attorney fees," meaning that she walks in the door to probate and the state automatically gives her somewhere around $9,000 that she can charge statutorily, built into the code, that she can charge. I mean, she loves it because probate is like guaranteed cha-ching for her, right? So that's what life would be like for my brothers-in-law and my dear wife if her parents didn't have a trust. minimum 18 months in California, 24 months most likely with a house to settle, and so on and so forth. So it's so great that they don't. So now let's go through the steps. This is what I want to share with you. The steps to settle an estate where the parents had a complete estate plan, right? Here's the outline of what you need to do. Now, quick disclosure, and you can find this online or you can email me and I'll send you the list. I took this list rather than come up with reinventing the wheel from Nolo, nolo.com, Nolo.com. Nolo.com is a great legal reference site. They have legal documents and some various, it's a good place to go for good, simple stuff and some good education as well. But if you'd like a copy of this list, please send me an email, Kraig@kraigstrom.com. So here's the list. Let's go through it. The very first thing that you need to do to settle the estate, because really nothing can happen without this, is you've got to get death certificates. You have to get those from the funeral home or from the county in general, and oftentimes that'll take a few weeks to get the death certificates for somebody who's passed away. Once you have the stamped official death certificates, you'll often want to get at least 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, depending on how many investment accounts or pensions or pieces of real estate or all those various things, you might want to get 10. Yeah, they can be kind of pricey, but you don't want to have to get stuck because a lot of places like banks and such, they want the actual physical copy and they keep it, right? Sometimes these financial organizations, they don't always give the death certificates back. So you got to get extras just to make sure that you've got them. Now, find and file the will with the local probate court. Now, this is a piece on Nolo.com that you may or may not have to do this in your jurisdiction, wherever you might be in the world. But an estate plan will come with a will and a living trust. They work together. And basically, the will says, all my stuff goes through my living trust. All my stuff goes through my living trust. So you can notify the probate court, and it's a very simple process. You can notify the probate court of the person's passing and say, here's the will, and the will says everything goes through my living trust. We're done. That's the way you file. You have to be mindful. You're not going in to open probate and do any complicated stuff. You're just filing to say, this person passed away, here's their living trust, or here's their will, and everything goes through their living trust. Now, the next step, notify Social Security Administration. You notify Social Security, especially in my parents' case, they're receiving Social Security benefits. You got to notify them that somebody passed away, because if Social Security is depositing money into the bank account and they continue to deposit money, they will come after the estate. They will come after the kids. They will aggressively go after getting any money back. That's what they do. They will do it. I met someone a long time ago whose husband passed away, and she had not notified the Social Security Administration, and no lie, someone from the Social Security Administration showed up on her doorstep wanting the money back. Right? You can't get them to answer the phone, for crying out loud, but they'll send somebody out to get your $798, right? That paid into the bank account, and then your husband passed away, right? And they want the money back. So you got to notify the Social Security Administration. You need to notify the State Department of Health, making sure that any other benefits, any Medicare, Medi-Cal, any benefits that you might be receiving that are paid into your accounts, your checking accounts, just automatically, you need to make sure that those departments, those municipal agencies are notified. Now, as far as the estate goes, you have to identify the trust beneficiaries. Now, with a living trust, in this case, the beneficiaries are very simple. It's family members. There's not a lot of complications. Sometimes in a living trust, there might be many, many beneficiaries, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, legacy trusts, a variety of things that need to be identified, that you've got to make sure that you know who the beneficiaries are And then you need to notify the beneficiaries. You need to notify everyone, hey, by the way, FYI, you are a beneficiary of mom and dad or auntie and uncle's living trust. Letting them know is very important. You want to notify them. The next step, you inventory the trust assets. Now, in the case of my in-laws, the trust assets are primarily the house. However, there's all of the personal possessions in the house. Well, that's a really long process, very complicated to go through and inventory all that. So if you're in a situation where there are many, many beneficiaries and there are perhaps some valuable additional assets that are attached to the living trust, you've got to get through and inventory them. Next, if you are the trustee of the trust. Now, that is the person who has been assigned, usually the favorite child or a favorite child, someone that the parents trust. If you are tasked with being the trustee, you really also, that means you have to protect the trust property. You've got to make sure that the trust property stays safe. Make sure the insurance on the house is paid for. If there's cars or valuable automobiles or collections, you've got to make sure that the insurance is paid so that those things are not at risk. Because if you don't, as the trustee, protect the trust property and property is lost because of your negligence, guess what? Trust beneficiaries might sue you. So you've got to inventory the trust assets. You've got to protect the trust assets. Now, big important deal. And this really should have been early on in the process. You've got to get a new tax identification number for the living trust. When you create a living trust during your lifetime, you create a revocable living trust. Now, when both people, usually a husband and wife, pass away, the living trust Social Security number used to be attached to one of the husband or the wife. They're gone. They've now passed. So now the living trust becomes irrevocable and it needs its own tax identification number. It's a very simple process. You can file it online, or you can go through an accountant, which I usually recommend, and file what's called an SS4 filing to get a tax identification number for the trust. Now, once you've got that, you need to transfer property into the trust. So if there are bank accounts that used to be in the trust under mom and dad, or there are assets that little miscellaneous assets and certificates of deposit and cash accounts and bank accounts that might not have officially been in the trust, the estate plan covers that and allows for those things to pour over into the trust. You've got to transfer all of those miscellaneous little things into the trust. You would essentially go into the bank with the new tax identification number and say, I need a bank account set up specifically in the name of the trust under this new tax identification number. And then all of any proceeds, if you sell the house or cars or other assets, all of that goes into that new bank account for the living trust so that it can then be dispersed. So now you've transferred property into trust account. You've reviewed the trust investments and CDs and cash accounts and miscellaneous. You've recorded all of the trust assets. You want to make sure, if you're the trustee, that you do your darndest, do your best to keep good records. Now, in the case of my wife's family, not going to be any issues there. Nobody's going to argue. We know who the trustee is. He's a solid guy. Everything's great. Now, in a complicated trust and estate where there might be a little infighting potential with children, grandchildren, etc., the trustee needs to keep really good records. Really good records, so that the trustee can cover his assets or cover everybody's assets, if you know what I mean. Now, in the case of a very valuable estate, And the case with a house. You've got to get the assets appraised. You've got to get the assets appraised. So someday, let's say that my wife and her brothers decide to sell the house. Well, they're going to, of course, get an appraisal. They'll work with a professional real estate company, and they'll get it sold for a market rate, and all will be well. Now, in a case where an estate, for example, parents or family members died, leaving behind mortgages or debts and things like that, paying the debt is the final thing, where you pay off mortgages, you pay off any kind of liens, debts on assets, and then the last step, you close the estate. That account that you set up at the bank with that new SS4 filed tax identification number, well, that account should be the repository for all the money that ultimately then gets split up and divided to the beneficiaries, and then, hopefully not taking too long, you close the estate. You send out the assets, the money to the beneficiaries, and the estate is closed. Some estates will go on for a long, long time, and they're designed to go on for a long time, and you might want to consider getting a professional trustee to manage the estate. Now, my law firm that I work with, we actually have professional trustee services that are very nominal as far as an annual fee and an expense, much less expensive than big specific trust companies that do this that's their only job. They charge a lot of money for it. My law firm, we have a very nice, affordable trustee service. So if you have a trust that might go on for a generation or two, you may want to consider getting a professional trustee instead of putting one of your kids in as the trustee, because that's kind of a job for a long time, right? So here's the idea. If you love your kids, if you love your grandkids, if you love your family, give them a living trust. Get your own living trust. Give them a living trust. Christmas time is coming. You want to give your young kids just getting started a great surprise gift. Get them a living trust. Get them an estate plan. You can go through my firm. I have a special arrangement with my law firm to do a full estate plan at an awesome price. Really fantastic price compared to what you charge at just about any other law firm, especially here in California. Please consider it. Give the gift of a full-blown estate plan. I can help. Send me an email, Kraig@kraigstrom.com, Kraig@kraigstrom.com, and that's going to wrap it up. I promised a short one today. I got pretty close. Have a fantastic week, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Really appreciate the support. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Personal Pension Radio podcast. We took notes for you, so if you missed any part of the show, you can find a full transcript of each episode at personalpensionradio.com. Be sure to download your free retirement income crisis report at personalpensionradio.com. While you're at it, we would appreciate some iTunes love. Please leave us a fantastic rating on iTunes by going to personalpensionradio.com/iTunes. Thanks again for listening. Now for the disclosure. Information presented is for educational purposes only and is not intended for solicitation, sale or purchase of any security or financial product. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and your tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed here. The term personal pension refers to a marketing name designed to educate future retirees and retirees about the economic principles behind creating their own pension-like income. The term personal pension is not intended to be confused with a defined benefit pension plan offered by an employer or by a government entity.